Okay, guys, welcome to the last session. So in this lesson, we're going to look at funerals specifically. Now, before we engage in this activity or the activities attached to this lesson, I need you to make sure you've read your reading logs, you recognize what Christians believe or do at funerals, and you recognize what Muslims do also at funerals. Alright, so first thing I'd like you to do is start the connect. So I want you to imagine, I want you to look at this picture, and I want you to imagine you're in this place. I want you to tell me what you can see, what you can feel, and what you can hear. And then I want you to think about these questions. Why are funerals times of sadness? Okay, so I want you to take about 2 minutes. I want you to write down all your responses in your book, because I'm going to check your book and I'm going to mark your book. So I want you to check all, write down your responses. What can you see, feel, and hear? And why are funerals sad times? Okay, so take about 3 minutes. Go. Okay, brilliant. So if you guys have fed back or you've written that down, you have the responses in your book. I mean, I'm going to focus on the last ones. Why are funerals sad times? Well, funerals are sad times because we tend to say goodbye to people we've known for a long time, people we have an emotional attachment to, people we might have a physical attachment to. And so these are incredibly sad times because those persons or those people are no longer with us, in terms that they're no longer alive, and they're going somewhere else. Depending on your belief, they go somewhere else, and it's the somewhere else that makes us sad because, well, we can't be there with them. So the key focus of this lesson is not just about what happens at a funeral, but actually how is religious belief expressed? How is religious belief shown at a funeral? So let's go. So, I want you to just look at all these people, alright? These are all famous, incredibly people that have lived amazing lives, that have passed away and died. And maybe at the funeral, you know, there was great mourning. Maybe when they were alive, people didn't say things that they normally would have said to them. But when they died, people said these amazing, incredible things about them. But I want you to think about this. Why do you think non-religious people are more likely to be afraid of death than religious believers? And then I want you to tell me, what are your own personal views on the afterlife? Remember, I don't want you to talk about this or just talk about this. I want you to think about it, and I want you to write your answers down in your books, okay? So, why do you think non-religious people are more likely to be afraid of death than believers? And what are your views on the afterlife? I'd like you to do it now. Okay, so if you're back, then obviously you've done the activity. So, first one. Why are non-religious people more likely to be afraid of death than religious believers? Well, it's not always the case, but you tend to find that religious believers believe they're going to a better place. Non-religious believers don't believe in heaven or hell, and so they say things like, you know, when you die, that's it. There is nothing else, it's just black space. But religious believers do not hold on to that. Both Christians and Muslims believe that actually when you die, well, you will be resurrected. You will come back again. You will go to heaven. You will be with God. You will spend eternity in a great, great place. And that's, you know, and that's how life will be. And so that's what they believe about life, about life after death and funerals. They believe that you go to a better place. You're with God, and everything works out brilliantly. Okay, so these are key elements of a Christian and Muslim funeral. Absolutely key elements. What I would like you to do now is write a sentence or two summarizing each key point. So in terms of Christianity, what is the funeral? What happens at the funeral? What is the committal? What happens there? What is the cremation? What happens there? And after the funeral, what tends to happen? In Islam, I want you to write about, well, what is the final hours and when does this apply? What does purity have to do with how a Muslim believer is buried? I want you to think about the funeral and the burial process and what happens. And then, in terms of mourning, I want you to tell me the do's and don'ts of Islamic teaching on mourning. And then once you've done those questions, I want you to move on to the stretch. I'd like you to pause the video now. Okay, so let's go through this. The funeral. What is the funeral? Well, the funeral is a gathering where friends and families of the deceased come to say their goodbyes. And at the funeral, you have hymns being sung, You have a priest that leads it, and the priest, just like the wedding, the priest represents God. You have hymns being sung, you have prayers being said, so prayers for the family. And at the funeral, in the pulpit at the front, sometimes you have friends and families that come to say loving things or kind words about the deceased, the person that's gone. Then we have the committal, the burial. So this is the process where people are put into the ground. And this is absolutely important because this is the last time the family, the friends will get to say goodbye. This is where they will get to see say goodbye to the person who's passed away, but not just see them in the casket or see them at the church. This is where they go into the ground. So literally, this is the final moments of the link between that person and their physical body and their family or their friends or anyone like that. And the committal is important because it's the going into the ground. And the reason why that's key is because a quote from the Bible in reference to humanity says, "From dust you came, and to dust you shall return." And so the reason why they put them into the ground is to fulfill that scripture where it says, well, you were made from dust, i.e. Adam and Eve, when God made man, he made them from the dust. And then when each man dies, to dust you shall return, meaning you will go back into the ground, into the earth, into the dust where you came from, because that's where you originally, like your flesh, your physical body came from. And so the committal is important, and that's why we put, in Christianity, they put the bodies into the ground. Then in some Christian traditions, and some Christians prefer this, you would actually have cremation, where the body will be burnt and turned into ashes. Now, not all Christians do this, and there aren't any specific traditions that agree or disagree, but cremation is where you burn the body, it goes into the ground. Now, what happens after the funeral? Well, everyone tends to go back to the family's home or a venue that they've rented out, and they have food, they converse, and it's just an opportunity for everyone that came to console each other. To think about the deceased, to think about how great their life was and how much they're going to miss them. They tend to have food, and it's a solemn, it's quite a solemn sort of environment where this happens. Now in Islam, the final hours is if a person is about to die. So they're not dead yet, but they're about to die. It's really, really important that they say the Shahada. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. It's their final prayer to let God know they're coming. And so the final hours are absolutely key. Also, this idea of purity is important. In Islam, the body that is being buried is wrapped in an ihram. So this is a white piece of cotton, and people that tend to go on Hajj are wrapped in this, but it's a white piece of cotton and they wrap the body in that, and the white piece represents purity, because they are going back to meet God. And so actually it's a sign of purity, it's a sign of, well, you're going back to meet God, and so let's make sure you're dressed appropriately. The funeral and the burial are really key stages. Now, just like in the picture, at a funeral, the men will line up at the front and the women will line up at the back. The funeral will be led by an imam, which is an Islamic equivalent of a priest, not in exactly the same sense, but he will lead the ceremony, and they will say a prayer, and then the body will be put into the ground. Now, it's really important in Islam, unlike Christianity, where people might have extravagant caskets and, beautiful caskets made of ivory. In Islam, it is said that actually every body should be buried in a plain coffin. And that's to represent that when men die, they are all equal. No matter how great, no matter how small, at the moment of death, every man is the same. And so at the funeral, they ensure that the body is put in a plain coffin and it's put into the ground. And the last one, mourning. So people aren't allowed and aren't encouraged to cry and to wail at a funeral. It is said that when the women are mourning, they should mourn for the first 3 days, and after that, they should stop mourning. In Islamic funerals, you're not allowed to cry aloud. You're not allowed to scream, "Oh no, my son." It's not encouraged. And because actually the funeral and the death of that person is a time for celebration. They are going to meet Allah. They are going to meet God. And so the question is, why are you mourning? Why are you sad? Yes, it's a sad occasion, but be joyful, for they are going to meet God. Now, in our stretch question, we said, why is judgment a key element of teaching on the afterlife? Well, the reason why it's a key element was because Jesus Christ died and resurrected, and then told every Christian believer through the Bible that they will also die, but they will also resurrect and come back to life. And they will be judged after they've resurrected. And in Islam, we have that same teaching coming through, that once you die, you will be resurrected. But in Islam, the funeral and the death of a person is really key, because this is the transition stage between the earth and the heavens. Now, it is said that the afterlife is absolutely important, and actually how people conducted themselves in their lives is key, because if they conducted themselves correctly, they will be in Jannah with God, in paradise, where they will celebrate and they will have a fantastic life with God. And that's an absolutely key element, that they should have lived a good life and now they get to be with God. And so this is an amazing and incredible opportunity that not everybody would get, and everyone will get in due time, but not right now. And so in Islam, the afterlife is key, because if you've lived a good life, then actually you're going to have a great afterlife. Okay, so guys, it's your favorite time again, and it's time to answer some questions. So what I would like you to do is, I would like you to answer all three of them, the 4, the 6, and the 8. And I want you to think about what these questions are asking you. And I want you to think about how you're going to answer it. Remember to use your structure. Remember to use the writing frame. So, here's the first question. It is important to have a big funeral in order to give someone a good send-off. Give 2 reasons why a religious believer would agree or disagree with this statement. Now, it's really important here that you give 2 reasons. It can be Christian, Muslim, agree, disagree. It can be a whole mixture. But you must give 2 reasons why a religious believer would agree or disagree with this. Now, thinking about what we've just said, Christians might adhere to this, but Muslims probably won't. That's the only clue you're getting. Alright, now, if you get a 6-mark question, it says to you, explain the funeral rites from 2 different religious traditions. Remember, whenever we talk about religious traditions, we're referring to Christianity and Islam. So, funeral rites. What does it mean by funeral rites? Well, it's simple. The things that happen at a funeral. The actions that happen at a funeral. Those are known as funeral rites. The event, the things that occur. And so what this question is asking is really simple, actually, and it's what we've just gone through. Explain what happens at a funeral. Explain the traditions people follow, the things people do, and why they do them. Do not forget, this is a 6 mark, so we need religious quotes. And last but not least is, our life makes no sense unless there is something afterwards. Our life makes no sense unless there is something afterwards. Now, it's saying to you, do you think our life is purposeless? Do you think our life has no final value or no intrinsic meaning if there is nothing after we die? Or actually, does it still have meaning? Does it still make sense even if there is no afterlife? Would our actions of us being good and bad, would that actually mean anything if there is no afterlife? Alright, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to attack these questions, and then once they're in your book, please make sure I get your book back, make sure your teacher gets your book back, then we can mark your answers, check your responses, and give you feedback on how well or areas I need to improve. Alright guys, thank you very much for listening, and I will see you all soon. Good luck with your exam, okay? Please make sure you put the effort in, watch the revision videos and the rest of the YouTube channel, and I think you did great. Alright, take care guys, and see you soon.